friends. My name is Stephanie Romero, and I am the founder and executive director of Awaken Pittsburgh. I want to welcome you to our podcast, The Ripple Effect. Awaken Pittsburgh is a nonprofit dedicated to fostering well-being, empathy, and compassion for all by teaching and encouraging mindfulness and meditation practices. I also want to take a moment to let you know that Awaken Pittsburgh offers many other opportunities for practice and connection. For example, you can join our online community, which features a space to more deeply explore the topics we cover with our guests. We have weekly posts to spark thought, practice, and reflection. I hope you will come join us to explore, connect with others, and deepen your practice. You can find out more at awakenpittsburgh.org. Welcome to the Ripple Effect podcast. Today, my guest is Jackson Kerchis. Jackson is a speaker, author, and trusted advisor to the U.S. military and private sector clients working on employee happiness. He prefers the job title given to him by a Canadian radio host, the Happiness Nerd. He is passionate about happiness research and education. As a former startup executive, management consultant, and Zen monk, he brings a unique perspective to the how of happiness. He also works as a program deliverer with Awaken Pittsburgh, and he loves helping people build the habits of mind which are the foundations for happiness. This is something he covers in his recent book, How to Stick to Meditation: The Science of Habit Meets the Art of Mindfulness. Jackson, I just want to first thank you for joining us on the Ripple Effect podcast today. I have had the great pleasure to get to know you over the past, couple of years now, I think. And I'm excited to deepen our knowing of each other through this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I'm certainly looking forward to it.
So as you know, our topic for this month is awareness. And I guess before we dive into that topic, though, I would love for you to just talk a little bit about your experience with meditation and mindfulness and how that has impacted your life.
Yeah, well, I really feel like maybe it's a bit cliche, but mindfulness or meditation has really been kind of a focal point of my life, and I think I'm certainly a work in progress. It kind of I sometimes joke I'm a reformed a-hole, and I think mindfulness and meditation plays a key role in that. So I sort of discovered this practice just doing an 8-week free mindfulness-based stress reduction course while I was living abroad on a gap year before college. And I just did this course, not really knowing what to expect, and it totally just changed my way of being. I felt like, interacting with people, being less argumentative, being able to, in most cases, manage the intense emotions and anger, sadness, all of these things. I was like, this is an incredible practice. And it sort of teed me up later on to spark an interest in happiness and psychology, which led me to major in happiness at the University of Alabama, teach a happiness course there, do research, and then ultimately, after college, live for 4 months with Zen monks as well. And so this sort of practice, or maybe practices around meditation and awareness, have been maybe the formative factor in sort of opening me into this idea of like growing as a person, right? This was, I think, really the catalyst.
That's amazing. I feel like your story is so wonderful. I myself now am heading to the grandmother phase of life, right? So I see myself kind of growing into that phase of life, maybe retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm at that age and stage. And so, and you're at the just starting your career stage. So for me, it brings me so much joy to hear someone that discovered practice just before entering college and feel just like so much joy for you that you have had this gift so early in your adult life.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's odd, being in like a freshman dorm, right? And you're like a sort of advanced, maybe that's a, general term, but like an advanced meditator as a freshman at the University of Alabama, and you're sort of looking around and you're like, yeah, this whole thing, I think it sort of psychologically aged me like 15 years in terms of just my mannerisms and sort of my life tendencies. Like, yeah, I felt like an old man a lot of times in school just looking around, and I too am very thankful, right? Because I think it's sort of like this idea of compounding. So, an airplane, example, if you move, you're taking off from LA and you shift the nose of the airplane like 2 inches, by the time you could either end up in New York or DC, right? And so I think the earlier you engage with these practices in your life, it's kind of that effect of, kind of a greater magnitude of change when you shift that trajectory over years. And so, yeah, I too am very lucky to have stumbled into it when I did.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I want to shift now to the topic of awareness, and I'd love to hear from you, how maybe you think about that term awareness in the context of meditation and mindfulness, and yeah, any thoughts you have on the role of awareness in your practice and in your life.
Yeah. Well, in the maybe big picture life side, I really think it's the kind of the foundation for the term I would use is happiness, because I have an interest in that whole field and research and study. But maybe more broadly, it would just be your like living intentionally, right? Whatever that means for you, whatever the good life is, your career, whatever. It's kind of like, to me, awareness is the foundation, right? Because if you don't have a sense of where you are and where you're going, like nothing's going to change. And so it's almost, to me, it kind of underlies all of these domains of like, if you want to get more fit, well, you kind of need foundation of awareness, right? Because you need to bring attention to your habits around your eating or your exercise. If you want to improve your relationship, right, you need an awareness of how you're engaging in those relationships. So big picture, I think that awareness can be, moment to moment, right? Very important for your experience, but also in the context of like intention, it's really the foundation for creating the life you want to live. Now, how it relates to meditation, I actually think is an interesting one to explore, because I almost think of it as like awareness is kind of an attribute or a capacity, and meditation is the modality through which you train it. So if you're thinking, well, how about speed? Okay, well, you can train that by running sprints or doing ladder drills or doing footworks or squatting. While I was living at the monastery, one of the senior teachers told me this kind of, I thought, just fascinating view of meditation, as yoga is kind of a very foundational practice, and that you're bringing your awareness into your body. And the term yoga means to yoke. So, you're connecting your awareness to your body. And then you progress to a little bit more subtle form of awareness where you're following your breathing. That would be like Vipassana type meditation or transcendental meditation where you're following a mantra. And then Zen, for instance, is almost like a, graduate studies meditation where the object of your attention is even more subtle. You're essentially just focusing on awareness itself. And so all of that's to say, right, the common through line through all of those is that no matter what the meditation or mindfulness practice is, whether you're bringing attention back to your body, to your breathing, to the sounds, or even just to experience of the present moment itself, what you're doing is training that capacity for awareness. And so I say it's like running, right? Running itself is great, but then it's also so that you can have improved cardiovascular fitness in all other areas of life. And so I've always viewed it as I'm sort of intentionally training my capacity for awareness. So, while I'm doing the meditation, that's obviously lovely and fun and peaceful, sometimes, not so much other times, but also so that then when I'm in my daily life, I have a greater capacity to be in tune with that awareness or attention in the present moment.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. I also view meditation as the training ground, right?
Mhm.
And I love the way you describe, the different modalities and the different techniques, and Zen as being the graduate study. That's really, really funny and an interesting way to think about it. Yeah, for those of us who have explored all the different, well, probably not all, but a variety of ways of meditating, when we have that awareness of a very fixed anchor for our attention, right? When we bring our awareness to a really solid anchor, it's a really different experience and practice than when we have a wide open anchor, right? When we do open awareness practices, or like you said, look at awareness itself and try to maybe watch the watcher or
Yeah.
something. Sometimes you hear that expression, watch the watcher, right? Who's looking, who's seeing, where is awareness? That kind of practice can be slippery,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, so thanks for bringing in like all those different aspects, and I would love to hear you describe, like, in your daily practice, um, how do you bring awareness training or practices into your, like, what does your daily practice look like,
Mhm.
and what's the role of awareness there?
Yeah. Well, I sometimes joke that it's, I basically get up, have my schedule, do my formal meditation. I get up, sort of, wash my hands, dust off, and then just jump into daily life and proceed to just fail horribly and, totally forget all of the awareness practices that I just did. But, it is, I think that's the hardest part of this. And even when, one of my current teachers, really interesting background in that he's a Zen monk, a priest, um, but he's also the CFO of a fairly large nonprofit, which is a Zen center, but it's still a multi-million dollar operation. And so, something I even talk to still with him is, how do you kind of stay aware, so to speak, or bring this into daily life? And I haven't mastered it, but in terms of kind of my routine right now, I've developed, I would call, sort of a bespoke uh, practice, and that I do roughly 20-25 minutes of outdoor walking meditation. Because I've read that getting sunlight in the eyes in the morning is quite important for regulating some of your hormones and rhythms. I also personally just like it more than sitting. So then I'll do, maybe let's say 10 to another 25 minutes of the more traditional sitting practice, what you may imagine. It's like Zazen, which is really just kind of bringing your attention to the present moment without a really fixed object of awareness. That's sometimes translated as Shikantaza, just sitting. And then I'd have a little practice at the end of what I would call generative practice, which is really trying to cultivate specific emotional states. So one is loving kindness, right, which is a meta meditation. So I try to sense into my heart and really just mentally and physically actively generate those feelings. Then I do a similar little meditation on playfulness and goofiness, and then one on kind of certainty and confidence. And as I do that, I sort of just visualize what I want out of life for a couple minutes. And even as you listen to this, podcast, it can be an interesting thing to feel like those generative practices are overlooked, but you can actually intentionally bring your awareness to feelings of love in your heart, or what would it feel like if you're really just goofy and funny, or feeling super confident. You can actually generate those. And so, similar to the idea of building capacity, I think if you do a few minutes every day of really feeling certain and confident, or really feeling fun and playful, that you're building those muscles. So anyway, yes, it's a pretty robust routine, and I struggle at times to make it feel like I'm bringing it into my day. But I think having a little check-in here and there on my calendar, and trying to bring that intention with me, are kind of the best I've come up with so far.
No, I love that balance that you described of practices, the walking, right? And I think so many times for myself, I tend to be very intellectual and live in my head. And so bringing in any kind of movement or body practice just feels so important to, like, just remember we're a fully embodied human being, And yeah, like that's just really, really important, whether it's yoga or walking, or like I have a woman that I worked with years ago, and she took one of our classes and she landed on it totally shifted the way she jogged,
Yeah.
right? And that ended up being her practice, which is awesome, right? Which is really, really awesome. But I love your combination of like body-based, walking, being outside, and there's also an aspect of awareness that shifts us because I can't help but look around and see,
Mhm.
see the blue sky, see the clouds, see whatever's there, right? That's really important. Sitting, which you described, and then generative practices. And then just for listeners, if you feel like overwhelmed hearing, because that sounds like a lot, you can alternate days,
Yeah.
right? If you don't have a block of time to do like maybe 40 minutes or an hour all in one day, and you only have 10 to 15 minutes a day, walk on the days when weather allows, just sit other days and do generative practices when that's what's in your heart, like
Mhm.
I sometimes get drawn to the generative practices depending on my mood. Like a friend was diagnosed with COVID, right? Or another friend's son had a medical emergency. So just sitting and doing generative loving kindness practice and sending that out to those folks felt like what my heart needed.
Mm.
So I think you hit on the magic mix. But if folks don't have the time to do that whole package in one day, like totally okay to spread it out.
Oh, absolutely. I would echo that, and that's something I've even written a lot about is this idea of um, minimum effective dose, and kind of you have to have a habit before you build on it. So I tell people too, it's like if someone says, "Well, I want to meditate a few hours a week, and so every Saturday and Sunday I'm going to do an hour and a half." I would way rather you do 15 minutes a day, and it might end up even being less time. But every time you do that, you're kind of casting a vote or building an iteration, proving to yourself, oh, okay, I can do this. I have done it. And pretty soon you can start to do it consistently. And then once it's consistent, okay, well, maybe I want to do a little more or something. So,
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a lot of research behind what you're saying. It's that the smaller chunk
yeah.
really regularly is what is going to build the health and well-being muscle, as opposed to once a week for an hour or once a month for a whole day or something like that.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you that where we're at as far as our understanding of the impact of meditation, smaller amount more regularly is definitely where we should be recommending, I guess is the best word, advising. The other thing that was kind of tumbling around in my mind as you were talking about generative practices is kind of it almost the way you were describing it reminded me of affirmation practices.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it really that to me they're related. So I sometimes teach in my seminars about emotional intelligence. I use this acronym BAT. So, sometimes I'll bring a baseball bat so people remember it. And really that means that any emotional state, any psychological state to me is really comprised of BAT. So that's body, attention, thoughts, and language. Kind of group those together. And so I think in any of these generative practices, whether it's affirmation, visualization, they're really just different like legs of a stool that you use to generate that state, right? So to your point, in that example, maybe if you're saying, okay, I'm really stressed and overwhelmed. And so I say, well, what would it be like if you were not feeling stressed and overwhelmed? If you were like really relaxed and confident? Okay, well, body, right? My shoulders, they're going to be up by your ears or probably relaxed, right? Okay. Is your breathing going to be fast or slow, right? Is your chest going to be up or back? Okay, so I'm starting to generate that in my body. Like I'm feeling loose and confident. But then attention, okay, well, it's going to probably be going to things that are going right more than what's going wrong, things I've done more than what I have to do. And then finally, that thoughts and language, right? I think that's where the affirmations or visualization can come in. It's like, well, what would it look like out here or in here if I was really feeling relaxed and confident? Or, getting in that language, right? Of affirmation of, I'm feeling relaxed, I'm feeling confident. Okay, so all these things, it's not like magic law of attraction. If you're into that, fine, but not necessarily what I'm saying here. But it's just these are different components that you can use to generate that state. And then by uniting your body, your attention, your thoughts and language all around one state, you can create a pretty powerful effect. Because if I just say, hey, Stephanie, try to feel more relaxed right now, go. It's like, okay, but if you start to, breathe a little different, relax a little different, bring your attention there, do a few affirmations, relax, 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 you're going to be able to shift your emotional state a lot more dramatically, in my experience.
Yeah, I think you're naming something really important, and that's our self-talk. Like you
Hmm.
didn't say it directly, but like just in the way you were describing it, that's what was coming into my mind is like if we're having a day where we feel like we're in a funk,
Yeah,
right? Sometimes if we notice the story we're telling ourselves, and that's the thoughts and language piece that you're
yeah,
naming, right? It's actually we're getting ourselves caught in some negative thought patterns that potentially aren't even true,
yeah,
right? We
absolutely.
often we often get these things in our mind and we're like so sure, but they're actually not real, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the beautiful things I think that meditation has taught me is to notice my thinking and
Mhm.
to kind of notice that like gosh, our brains are all really wild and crazy and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in there that's not real.
Absolutely. I have well, I can even share a kind of a good story on that. When I was young, we went on this, took a canoe out on the lake, and it was a super windy day, right? Like we had no business being out there. There was like white caps on the lake, which never happens. So we're out there rowing along, and all of a sudden this wave hits us, right? And we hit this water, and it was like April, I think. It's like the first day you could be out there, and so it was freezing cold, and it just had that feeling like a cold shower of just shock. And so we sort of panicked and sort of grabbed the boat, the canoe, and it was kind of filling with water. So we're just hanging on to the edge of it. Of course, we had life jackets with us, but they were not on our bodies. So, very wise. And so we're kind of sitting there. I'm like, dude, am I going to freeze to death out here? Like, what's going on? And so I waved to this fishing couple guys on a little fishing boat, like, I don't know, 100, 200, maybe more, like 200, 300 yards away. So they can kind of see us, right? So I waved to them, and they smile and wave back, right? So I'm like, no, no, like, I'm trying to like gesture, wave them, come over. And they kind of do the same thing back, like, dude, just come over here. And so finally they, motor up beside us, and this old guy kind of puts on these rubber waders, and he jumps out of his boat, lands in the water, and the water's about up to his chest. And he says, okay, stand up. And, I had been hanging onto the edge of the boat, kind of kicking, and I finally sort of let myself go and put my feet all the way down, and the water was basically up to my chest. And he's like, okay, flip your boat over, get in the boat. And so what I realized is that thoughts, perceptions are not reality. And it's funny that, the famous Zen teacher I love, Thich Nhat Hanh, says the same thing. He says, are you sure of your perceptions? And so, exactly to your point, I think the greatest gift of mindfulness or these practices is you start to understand really that your thoughts are not reality, your perceptions are not reality. They can be, but they are not it, right? The map is not the territory. And so that's really, I think, an important insight that people can play with as they try some practice.
Yeah, and I think that this connects back to awareness because had you really been fully aware of your
Mhm.
surroundings, right, you would have been like, the water's not that deep.
Yeah,
Right? Like it doesn't matter if we get flipped. Yeah, it's cold, but it's
yeah.
not very deep, you know? And
Mhm.
and so when we don't have that kind of and we don't always have that open awareness of everything. It's impossible. So we kind of always are working on that limited amount of information and then drawing these conclusions based on our limited amount of information that many times aren't quite reality, right?
Yeah.
And then we have our panic moment, which you just described so beautifully. I love that's actually like such a beautiful story for so many reasons,
Yeah.
because you it could have gone wrong and you were so lucky that there was someone there that was like, just chill,
Yeah.
get back in the boat.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, so I think now, like just moving us a little bit, we've talked about kind of the foundational aspect of awareness, or you talked about that in these different aspects and how it works in practice. Um, and then, you did kind of hint at bringing this out into our daily lives, right? And we're starting that conversation with your example of being in the boat. But I wonder the role of self-awareness, right? So it's like a very specific type of awareness in your life and especially in your work because you're teaching meditation and
Mhm.
mindfulness. And as someone who also does that work, like there's an extra layer there to model,
Yeah.
right? And so I guess I'm just curious about how you view that role of awareness and in particular self-awareness and what you do.
Yeah. Well, to me, bringing self-awareness into daily life is, it can be challenging, but I think it's also one of the maybe trickiest to operationalize, we'll say, right? Because if it's like I want to be more, yeah, I don't know, strategic or more productive or something, it's like, okay, well, or I want to, be healthier. There's very tangible things you can do. Okay, I'm going to schedule a time block to go work out, or I'm going to schedule a time block to go work on my business, or I'm going to, But to me, it can be a little harder to, you know, take it and make it a bit more concrete. But I think the way self awareness shows up is, sometimes unexpected. I was driving one day. This was years ago. I was driving home in my brand new used convertible luxury car. And by luxury, I mean $3,000 car on Facebook Marketplace that I purchased. And I was going a little bit too fast, and I whipped into the side street by my house. And just as this guy was kind of, stepping out to walk his dog, and so I like slammed on the brakes. He jumped back, and we kind of locked eyes in that mutually pissed off sort of road rage sort of way, which I'm sure no one's ever experienced who's listening, but if you have, and so, he started mouthing things, I'm mouthing something back. Next thing you know, I threw open the door, started out after him, and just as he turned around, I kind of paused and I said, "Hey, that was my bad." And he was basically speechless, like, Wait, what?" I was like, "Yeah, I came in here a little too fast. Just, I don't know what I was thinking. I could have hit you. It's fine." And he's like, okay." And so anyway, we talked for a second. I got back in my car, and it was only after the fact that I thought, well, what was that? Like, what just happened? And I realized that that was my self-awareness kind of wearing away at me, right? And that doing this practice every day of, I love the term for mindfulness of learning to be where your feet are. But by doing that every single day, it had started to kind of bleed into other areas of life. And then when life happened, I showed up in a totally different way. And so to me, that's been my experience with bringing self-awareness into daily life is I feel like sometimes I almost don't even know that I'm, quote, more self-aware until an interaction happens or a conflict or a stress happens and I kind of catch myself and I'm able to, okay, be where my feet are and shift a little bit of how it shows up for me.
I don't think I've ever heard that expression, be where your feet are. I love that. I really, really love that. And I also love, like, your story is exactly my wish for so many people that I teach meditation
Yeah.
and mindfulness to. A lot of times I work with young people that maybe have, yeah, they've been having difficulty with anger,
Mhm.
right? Maybe they're getting into fights, or maybe their behavior is not what adults might want it to be. So they're
Mhm.
having trouble in school, right?
Mhm.
And that ability to have the anger show up, to have that moment where you're like justified in your rage or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, what the heck is this guy doing, right? And
Yeah.
then to just notice, like, oh, actually, maybe this was my bad,
Mhm.
to just notice that and be able to de-escalate yourself and then
Yeah.
just name it to that other person. So like that's exactly what my hope is, that the practice of meditation can, that space to notice and to shift to a response that's more appropriate to the situation
Yeah.
is exactly the outcome that I really, really hope that this practice brings to people. So it feels exciting that you experience that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really hard.
Mhm. Yeah, it certainly involves some, putting aside of it's like I think that I heard some saying once that's like, would you rather be right or be happy? And so life will reveal, especially if you're in a relationship, if you have kids, or just dealing with anger, or if you're somewhat of an argumentative person like I historically have been, life will give you that riddle quite often. Would you rather be wrong or be happy? And so, being willing to just be wrong is very powerful. Also helped that he had a very large German Shepherd with him. So I don't think that it would have been the most, effective reaction to do what I was going to do originally. But, ideally, you don't need that motivation.
That's awesome. That is really, really good. Yeah, really good. But I love that one too. Would you rather be right or be happy? And sometimes we do hold on to those things that suck our happiness out because we're so stuck, right? We're so stuck. So that's a great reminder. I can just imagine that being on a post-it note on a mirror somewhere for someone, right? That's really great. Well, I would love to. I ask all of the people who come on to our podcast if they have a favorite resource that they would like to share with others, and it could be any kind of a resource. So, yeah, is there something that is a favorite book or podcast or whatever? Is there a favorite resource you'd love to share?
Yeah, I'm sort of mm, cheating, looking back at my bookshelf. But I would say maybe two. The first, and naturally I'm a little bit biased here. I would say if you're kind of new to meditation, or perhaps you've done it but just haven't been super consistent, you may consider How to Stick to Meditation, which is a book that I wrote, published I think maybe 6 months ago. And the reason I advocate it is not because I think I'm the greatest author, but it's very practical, right? Because I had so many people coming up to me and friends who are like, "Oh, you lived with Zen monks and you've been doing this for years." I'm like this is it's not even say I'm not doing a good job of selling my own product. It's not even going to be that fun to read, but it's very much like if you just read this and do it, like you will stick to meditation forever because it's so like how to do this, follow along, build the reps and build the habit. So that's a good one if you're really serious about committing to this and want to make it stick. I would check that out. And if you're more general, just interested in some of this stuff, I think anything Thich Nhat Hanh is a very good introduction because he is Buddhist, he's Zen, but very much not, I wouldn't say like religious, quote unquote, very accessible teachings around mindfulness and awareness, and such a beautiful writer and incredible person. So,
Yeah, I second that. Thich Nhat Hanh is one of my absolute all-time favorites. And the cool thing about him is he's probably written 100 different books.
yeah.
So, like literally written. I tried to count at one point, and this was a long time ago, and I got to 88 or something like that. And I'm sure at this point there's like way more.
Yeah.
So he's written so many books. So you'll find whatever topic you will find he has written about, in addition to him being an amazing poet, actually. So that could be a doorway to enter if you're not sure you want to read kind of nonfiction meditation book. You could also look at some of Thich Nhat Hanh's poetry. So thank you for naming him. I love Thich Nhat Hanh as well. He's near and dear to my heart. Is there anything else, Jackson, that you would like to say, either about the topic of awareness or just something that I didn't ask you about that you want to add?
I don't think I have a lot. Maybe my kind of send off will just be, it's kind of top of mind because I just at studyhappiness.blog is where I share some essays. I just wrote one about this that was titled Just Start. And it was essentially going through all these things of these scenarios we find ourselves in where it's like, I want to start a business. And it's like, oh, well, what market am I going to do? And how do I do that? And it's like, I want to start a podcast. You're like, well, how do I get a recording studio and a microphone and a producer? Or, I want to start trying meditation a little bit. Well, do I need to buy this cushion or buy a course or, go to a monastery? And it's like, just start, that's it. If you're unsure of what to do next, just start. If you're not sure how to start, you start by starting. So just start. And so that would be my invitation for people. Sure, give it a Google search, watch a video, whatever. But if you're like, well, how do I do? I'll just start. Just sit and do nothing, or sit and try to pay attention to what's happening right now for 10 minutes every morning, and just prioritize starting and seeing what comes of it.
I love that. It reminds me, like, that's exactly what I did. I read Pema Chodron's book, When Things Fall Apart, and I was like, I want that. I want what she's talking about. And she keeps saying you have to meditate to get it. So I'm going to meditate. So I literally just like grabbed a pillow off my sofa, stuck it on the floor, and just started sitting and was like, what am I supposed to do now? And that was like over 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I've been working on it ever since.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's probably just the best advice. Just start and you will figure it out.
Yeah,
Put your intention behind it, right?
absolutely.
That's it. Well, great pleasure getting to know you more deeply and hear a little bit about your work. And I'm excited to check out your book as well. And yeah, just lovely to be in conversation with you again, Jackson.
Yeah, no, it's certainly been a pleasure, and anytime I can be a resource or just feel like chatting, I'd love to do it again.
Oh yeah, I'll be hitting you up.
Great.
Say Something Studio.